Hi everyone, welcome back to A Little More Inspired. My name is Blanca. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to hit the follow and subscribe button. And don't forget to check out my website, a littlemoreinspired.com, to explore all of my content. For this second part of talents, I'm going to continue to break down how to recognize your talents, how to nurture your talents, and how to fight the voices that are externally influencing us, that are trying to convince us that we are not worthy of our talents, that we are not worthy of the desires that God places in our heart. So, yeah, thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy this episode. So, here are two signs that you have discovered your genius. One, it will bring you joy and a feeling of timelessness. I was actually on a flight from Mexico City back home like 5 days ago, actually. I was returning from a trip and I was watching one of the free movies on the plane. It was a movie about becoming Led Zeppelin. It was like a really interesting documentary, but it went down the history on how each member was found and how they created the band. I thought they all had very unique ways of discovering their genius. And one of the things that Jimmy Page says at the end of the movie, who is the lead guitarist and the one who produced all of the music at the beginning of their career, he said that if you have a genius or there's something in you that you really love and makes you unique, to not listen to the voices that tell you to not nurture it, because it's there for a reason. Each one of the members, the way that they discovered their instrument or their talent was in a very innocent way. Something sparked their interest when they were little and they remember this experience having a very impactful memory. John Paul, who is the bass player of the band, talks about how he remembers being 8 or 9 years old and going to see some show and it really impacting him, and him realizing that he was interested in being a musician one day. And he told his dad that he wanted to play the bass guitar, and his dad was like, I don't think that you should play the bass guitar. I think that you should play the saxophone. If you learn how to play the saxophone, you'll always have a job, because the dad thought that the bass guitar was a novelty instrument. And he goes, no, I think I want to play the bass guitar, Dad. And he was really good at all kinds of instruments. And so he ends up finding a job as an organ player in a Catholic church for this priest. And he's like, I didn't really want to play the organ, but it paid money. So I did it, and I ended up really liking the priest at the church. And with the money that I made from those organ sessions, I was able to buy my first electric bass guitar, which ended up, changing his life, because then he meets Jimmy Page and whatever. I just really liked that each one's individual story, loved the spark that had happened to them when they were little, and nothing really took them off course. And they say that at the beginning of their career, they were just playing for each other and for the fun of it. And when they were choosing the name Led Zeppelin, originally the Led Zeppelin was only with Jimmy Page and these other randos. And then they all quit because they didn't think that there was any success in it. And Jimmy Page stayed, kept the band, and then started to find all the other new guys, which is who we know now. But each one of them wouldn't have been found if they wouldn't have believed in themselves and the spark of talent that they had. Eventually, they decide to rename the band because they don't want to have the energy of the old band. None of them could think of a name, and some guy suggested Led Zeppelin. Eventually, they ended up being, one of the best rock bands of that generation. So, yeah, I think that those are stories that you can be inspired by if you don't think that you have a talent. Obviously, these are very specific creative talents, but they're still inspiring nonetheless, of people who really believed in themselves and the spark that they felt, the love they felt for their music. Many people cast aside their genius because it doesn't seem spectacular enough, or because family and friends expect something different. Too often we abandon our genius because it doesn't make us enough money or fit the world's ideas of success. But there is genius within you, and we find it by listening to the voice of God in our lives. When you are looking for your clues, you have to be strong in your convictions and not worry so much about the outcomes, and just do it for the fun of it. So he goes on to say that loving the giver more than the gift, it isn't enough to simply discover your talents. This is where many people go astray. They discover their gifts but then abandon the giver of the gift. It is an astounding act of ingratitude to love the gift more than the giver. Once you've discovered your gift, the next step is to discern how God wishes for you to express that gift in this world at this particular time in history. All our needs are interconnected. One of those needs is to discover your talents. You have a genuine need to uncover your genius and share it with the world. Why you should share your genius with others. God didn't give you your talents just for yourself. He entrusted them to you so that others could be blessed through you. Maybe your genius is meant to touch 3 people, or maybe 3 billion. One is not better than the other. And that's where I think that people really mess up on cultivating their creativity, is that we just are constantly comparing what our genius should be received as, or we get really attached to the results. There has to be a sense of humility. It kind of reminds me of the movie Amadeus, story of Mozart. That's a really great film. It is about who's the guy, the Italian guy who's also a composer who had asked God to give him the talent of music. And he ended up being really successful in Venice. Mozart ends up coming to Venice to perform, and he totally is triggered with an immense amount of envy because he feels like God gave him this gift but didn't give it to him to be famous the way that Mozart was famous. And the movie is really a great story about being so unaware of the gift that you have, that you are so focused on somebody else's life and you don't know what baggage that person comes with, because Mozart is actually filled with a lot of things and a lot of struggles that no one knows about, but people only look at his talent. And so this guy from Italy is totally hating on him and wants to see him fall because he feels like he's stolen something from him. He had asked God with pure intention, I want this talent, and God gave it to him. And then he misused it because he got his ego involved. Maybe his genius was just to be in Venice and he lived like a nice life. Meanwhile, Mozart only ended up living until he was like 30 something years old. Like he had like a really short life, and he struggled with addictions and gambling, and he never really was a fully realized person because people only used him for his talent. Meanwhile, this guy ended up living until old age and saw his whole life realized, but he couldn't see it because he kept comparing his genius to Mozart. He ends up abandoning God because he thinks that God has cursed him with this desire to be a musician, but not the ability to become famous. And the man was famous. He just wasn't as famous as Mozart. And sometimes we're not meant to be as famous as Mozart or as this or that. We're just meant to be in this little niche, and that's okay. We really have to practice humility and gratitude that everything that we have is genuinely a gift. Matthew Kelly goes on to say, if God intended for you to share your gifts with 3 people, then sharing it with 300 could actually be harmful to you or to them and to the purpose he designed for it. You know, like some people shouldn't experience certain things because that would be their downfall. Their ego would get involved. Like this guy who he asked God for the gift of the talent of music and God gave it to him, but he really what he wanted was fame. And so he started to get in his ego when he started to get famous in Venice. His ego was crushed when he realized he was famous in Venice, but he wasn't as famous as Mozart. And so you don't wish what isn't meant for you. Be grateful for what you have. And you know, it's never too late. There will be times when you feel it's a little too late to find your genius or that you don't have one at all. Let's be clear, those thoughts do not come from God. Every force of darkness wants you to believe you don't matter, but God, with all of his angels and saints, are constantly showering you with the grace and wisdom to take the next right step. The one step is in the right direction that can completely shift your momentum. I really like when he says that those thoughts that you're not good enough for something that you feel deep down is a true, genuine desire. Anytime you start to think, oh, I'm not good enough for that thing or that experience or that person or that whatever, those are not God's thoughts. That's pride, and it wants to keep you small. But God wants you to be brave and to take steps in the direction that your highest calling. So I actually wanted to break down why negative thoughts that can be confused as thoughts of humility are actually not you being humble. It's actually pride. It's a deep spiritual nuance that I have been recently really studying and really trying to understand what true humility is. When you are truly in God's grace, you have a confidence that is funneled through His belief in you and your belief in Him. So, negative thoughts that say, I can't, I'm nothing, I'll fail, who am I to do that? Or I'm not good enough for them, I'm not good enough for that, may seem humble to you, but spiritually, they are not humility. They are actually rooted in pride disguised as self-doubt. I'm going to do a episode on humility, I think, after I finish the series of the Three Ordinary Voices, because I think that not a lot of people understand what true humility is. When he says that the enemy is trying to convince you to destroy your own self-worth, those thoughts that you have that are negative, that are tainted with anxiety and feelings that you can't do something, are how the darkness gets us. There's a lot of evilness in the world right now that wants to keep you worthless. But if God has called you to be something, you have to be brave to step into the light and go for it. And just know that why those thoughts aren't from God, God's voice aligns with truth, love, hope, growth, calling, identity. God may correct, convict, or redirect, but He never speaks to destroy your worth. He won't call you worthless, incapable, or insignificant, but God will correct you. He will show you when you're on the wrong path. And sometimes we go through hard things so that we can receive context of what really matters. But God may call you to do hard things, and He may even put you through trials where you feel like, gosh, why is this happening to me? But it's always to purify you, and it's to purify those negative things that we are keeping in our personality that we need to release to become the person that He's called us to be. So when those thoughts attack you, your identity or your potential, remember that those things are not God. That's pride. Negative self-belief seems like insecurity, but spiritually it centers self instead of God. When I was really depressed, I reflect back on my thoughts in those periods, and I think that it was really self-indulgent. I was really self-obsessed with myself, and all I thought about was me, 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 and how low I felt. Pride is not just arrogance, but pride is self-focus. I can't do this. I'm not talented enough. What if I fail? All of these things keep you at the center instead of God's power working through you. I recently have been watching a show called The Chosen, and I really love it. And I've also have read the New Testament. And the apostles, they were people that nobody thought anything of. You know, there wasn't anything extraordinary about them. But when God called them to be a part of Jesus' apostles and the people that would eventually form the church and teach us about everything that Jesus left behind, He developed their character and He purified them of their negativity through trials. But they changed, and once Jesus left, the Holy Spirit came upon them and gave them understanding. God can do great things within you. You just have to have the humility to accept God's grace to change you, but it is going to be work. It isn't going to always be easy. I do think that you have to realize, though, that to develop things and to really become good at something, it does take work. You're not going to be amazing at something at the beginning, but it's something that's probably whispering at you, and maybe it comes naturally, but you have to develop skills to master it. So, yeah, Matthew Kelly goes on to describe two truths. We all believe things about ourselves that aren't true, but if we stay open to the counsel of wise people and to the voice of God in our lives, over time, those who love us and God Himself will help unburden us with these false beliefs. Again, that reminds me of the story that I was talking about when I was in school and I thought that I was dumb, and I ended up discovering that I wasn't, that I just had some learning issues. Many people believe they have no talents. This isn't true. The truth is that you have an abundance of talents. God has given you so many gifts that it is impossible to express them all in a single lifetime. That's why it's essential to turn to God from time to time and ask God, what talent do you want me to focus on right now, this year, in this season of my life? Your talents aren't meant to stay hidden. They're meant to evolve with you as you grow and respond to God's calling. The second truth, you already have all the talents you need. And even more beautifully, you have the perfect mix of talents to fulfill the mission and live the life God created for you. There's no point in worrying about the talents you don't have or comparing your gifts to those of others, your parents, siblings, friends, teachers, or colleagues. That kind of comparison only leads to frustration and futility. If you don't have a certain talent, it's because you don't need it. And if you did, God would have given it to you. I really like this example because it reminds me of this story. I am currently allowing a friendship to develop between me and this person. We were having a conversation. I was telling him about my faith, and he was telling me that when he was in high school, he would pray really hard for God to help him be good at the sports he was playing. And after so many losses, he stopped praying to God because he felt this isn't real. If God was real, He would help me win the game. And so he stopped believing, and he's told me that he started to put his faith in himself, and life started to get better because he wasn't following the illusion of God. And when he told me that story, I was like, that's kind of a sad story, because I think that sometimes we think that God is the God of winning or the God of always things going easy. But if you think of God in that way, and I pray for Him to have this outcome, then He isn't real when I don't have that outcome. Then you are transactional with God. I'll only love you when you help me do well in life. And I told him, maybe that wasn't your talent, wasn't to be great at sports. You said yourself that you ended up finding your belief in yourself and that you were able to become self assured in yourself. And maybe God was guiding you away from that talent because there's other talents that you have that you would be best at. He was like, oh, I didn't think of it that way. And it created some kind of context in him. Matthew Kelly says that context reveals the true value of things. Almost every idea sounds good on its own until you put it side by side with everything else. It's only when you pause, reflect, and see things together that you realize which things are worth keeping and which are distractions and which are quietly leading you away from your purpose. Context delivers the kind of clarity that can stop you in your tracks, the clarity that takes your breath away and makes you go, wow, I was focusing on the wrong thing. So God is always trying to help you see in context the thing that you've been worrying about. It's not the most important thing. And sometimes God whispers to our hearts, but we don't really listen. Slowing down is a way to gain clarity. Clarity doesn't come from doing more. It comes from slowing down, from prayer, reflection, quiet walks, and moments of silence. Kelly calls this holy leisure. You are alone and you are in your isolation, but you are searching, you are seeking, you are going within, and you're praying, and you're looking for the things that really, truly call your interest. The battle for context points out something powerful. Sometimes we live without context because we start living life from the outside in, trying to fill our emptiness with validation, approval, and comparison. To live with context is to live in alignment with God's truth. So the next time you're unsure about your true purpose, what to prioritize, or even what to let go of, pause and ask, what's the true context here? Try to gain clarity of what truly matters. So finally, I'm going to go into what are universal and unique talents. Matthew Kelly describes two groups to discover your talents. Universal talents are gifts that most people share, like kindness, empathy, or the ability to make a difference in others' lives. There are unique talents, specific gifts that distinguish us as individuals, like artistic, musical, or intellectual abilities. Universal talents are often overlooked because they seem ordinary. yet they're the foundation of human goodness and connection, and they reflect God's own heart. Unconsciously devalue universal talents because everyone has them. We think they're too common to be special, but the truth is, the ability to make a difference in another person's life is an extraordinary gift. We have to realize that those choices of being kind, of being understanding, of being patient, it takes effort to be that way. Anybody who you think they're lying or they're being fake, ask yourself why you're so triggered by that. I find that those gifts that he says that are universal talents of kindness and empathy and ability to make a difference in others' lives, I don't think that we naturally value those things. I think that we see people who are naturally like that, and then we become entitled to their kindness. We think that we can take advantage of it. We value people who are arrogant, who are very ego driven, and we want their validation while we treat the person that's been kind to us like trash because we don't think that it takes effort to be that way. And we value things outside of us, like money and status. We discount what's sacred because our culture glorifies what's egotistical. We love a flashy person. When I'm doing my Instagram stuff, I really don't like to market myself, my vessel, because I really do like to focus on what it is that I'm learning and what it is that I'm creating. And I look at others who are really focused on putting their face out there and taking these very elaborate pictures of themselves, and they get so much attention. And I think to myself, that's what people like. People like fakeness. They like when you are showing off your body, when you are showing off your money, and they like that. They're attracted to that because they think that that is what's valuable. They live in that vibration of superficiality. Somebody who is less flashy, they're not going to be interested in that because it takes depth to be interested in more than the popularity of the person. I'm looking for people who have depth, who can see beyond my body or beyond my vessel or beyond my popularity or lack of popularity. We live in such a superficial world. Everybody wants to be a influencer. Everybody wants to be popular. Everybody wants to show how amazing their life is. We value flashiness over faithfulness, talent over tenderness, performance over presence. That's why we get tricked because we love the performance of goodness. We don't actually like true goodness. And in doing so, we miss the deeper beauty of the everyday divine. Universal talents, even though we all have them, very few of us take the time to truly cultivate them. So, misvalue talents. We've been conditioned to favor the superficial over the substantial. People obsess over things like, I wish I were taller, thinner, more talented, more successful. What is that compared to the ability to see, to feel, to love? Unique talents, the gifts that stand out, are also from God. They're meant to inspire, heal, and bless others in a specific way, but they are no more sacred than universal talents. Every single person is gifted in some way, but not everyone has yet discovered how their gift fits in God's plan. That discovery takes prayer, humility, and time. Patience. Everything that you are moving towards to find what you're good at takes time. It takes patience to heal. It takes patience to unlearn things. It is not an overnight experience. Anybody who sells you an overnight dream is lying to you. You know, sometimes we have a lot of things that we believe that aren't true, that is keeping us from getting to the truth of our abilities. And that it's a process. So be patient with yourself as you unfold. And don't worry about the outcome. Not everything has to be monetized. Just find the joy in the things that you love. And if that is meant to be monetized one day, eventually it might, or it might not, but it brings you joy and it's aligned with what God wants for you. Finally, your divine equipment. You are uniquely and perfectly equipped for your God given mission, even if you haven't discovered it yet. This is your season for preparation, and once you do discover it, never stop developing it. Remember, God has given you so many talents. You cannot fully express them all in one lifetime. So turn to Him often and ask, God, which talent do you want me to focus on this season of my life? That question keeps your talents sacred, rooted in humility, gratitude, and divine purpose. Look for character development. Look for how you can be impactful to just your everyday people. And if God is meant to give you that bigger success, He'll do it all in His timing. So yeah, this is the episode of Talents. I hope you guys felt inspired by the messages that I shared today and the stories that I shared. So hit the like button if you liked this video and subscribe so that you never miss any of my new episodes. Thank you so much, guys. Bye.